My name is Betsy Chess, and I'm proud to be a member of the museum's board of directors. Tonight, Elena Brokaw, the Barbara Barnard Smith Executive Director for the museum, will be interviewing Roz McGrath, a member of a longtime county family and author of a memoir of a feminist. Elena will chat with Roz for a bit and then open it up to you all for questions. If you would please write your questions in the chat box. That way we'll be able to read them and everyone can see them and answer on Zoom. And we'll relay all of those questions to Roz before we wrap it up tonight at 6. And so, drum roll, without further ado, here's Elena.
Betsy, thank you so much. How wonderful and fitting that you're doing the intro for this very first episode, since you yourself will be appearing on a later episode. A little teaser there, because Betsy herself is an author. So I'm Elena. I'm the lucky person who gets to be the director of the museum. I'm here to talk with Roz, but since it's happy hour, first, I wanted to tell you, we asked Roz what her favorite cocktail is, and it's vodka and cranberry with some lime juice, known as a Cape Cod. We called it a Camarillo Cod, which is just downright odd now that I say it. But anyway, we have it. Roz has got hers there. She's at the museum. I've got a chunk of fresh lime, hopefully here from Ventura County. So please, everybody grab a drink and enjoy. So tonight we're here to talk with Roz about herself, but also about her book, Memoir of a Feminist, which she published in 2020. A little bit about the book. It's kind of hard to categorize this very entertaining book. It's almost more like a collection of stories than it is your typical autobiography. So it is definitely part about regional history, because anybody who lives in Ventura County knows the name McGrath, obviously. So she has a long history here in the county. It's her stories of growing up in a tumultuous time. Sound familiar to anybody? And really growing into becoming, I think we could call her a feminist activist, embracing feminist activism. We hear a lot about her private life and some of her wrenching personal decisions that she had to make in this book. But really, when I read it, what I think it is mostly about is it's about family, maybe mostly about mothers and daughters. And she talks at length about why some people, some women have huge families, why some women make the choice to have no children, and how impactful those decisions are and how they affect not only our lives and the lives of our family, but of our community around us. So, Roz, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here, and I can't believe I'm the first one of this series, but thank you for that honor.
Yeah, well, you know, we're not expecting much. Just setting the tone for the whole series.
Good.
So before we get into some questions, I'm going to ask you to read a paragraph from early on in the book. And you and I have talked about the paragraph that I'd like you to read, but I'd like to set the stage a little bit first. So the first chapter of the book is really mostly about your great-grandparents and mostly your great-grandmother, Bridget Donlin. So Bridget Donlin was born, I think, in 1845. Yeah, I'm sure 1845. And she immigrated to America in the very early 60s with her brother, Paul. Paul, was that her brother? Tom. And they ended up in San Francisco. Tom died very soon while he was working on a construction job, building a church. Interestingly, fell from the roof and died. So she was all alone. Quickly after that, she met Dominic McGrath, who I think is who many of us think of as sort of the patriarch of the McGrath family, and Dominic's is on, you know, Oxnard Boulevard and everything. They married very quickly. They moved down, I think in the late 1860s, they moved down to Ventura County. He bought part of the Rancho Colonia. He bought it from Thomas Bard. And during her very short life, she was pregnant 14 times. Most of those children lived to adulthood, but she died at the age of 42, giving birth to her 14th child who was stillborn. So both she and the baby died. So it's quite a story, a lot going on there, obviously. And when the way that you write it, it's a very loving and admiring story about your family and the roots that you came from. So then for the first time in this book, it's really been a story about her history, we really hear Roz's voice. So I want you as the reader to hear the first time we really hear Roz entering into the story. So Roz, please go ahead.
Elena, you're so good at capturing the essence of Bridget and Dominic arriving here. I need to say they landed in San Francisco by way of boat and ended up in Dublin, California, which was an enclave of Irish American immigrants. But anyway, I'm going to read one paragraph, bear with me. Oh, here's the cover of my book, Memoir of a Feminist. And there's one paragraph that I'm going to read about Bridget and myself. Our destinies could not have been more different if we tried. As her great-granddaughter, I chose not to have children, practiced birth control at every level in my lifetime, and witnessed and thought about the burgeoning population of my birthplace at every juncture. I am deeply saddened to see nature overruled by thoughtless people who are selfish, self-centered, and not concerned about the legacy they are leaving. It is a well-known fact that Native American tribes for thousands of years controlled their population growth through the use of herbs as birth control. They understood all too well the hardship of watching starving children if they outgrew their natural surroundings. They were keenly aware of what sustainability meant. Unwanted and unappreciated children are the scourge of every society, and ours at this point is no different. Religion and conservative thinking keep science from advancing to meet the new challenges of overpopulation and global warming. Instead of creating advanced male birth control measures, Viagra is the new wonder drug. We are going backwards in time and ignoring our future. So that's a little bit of the difference between Bridget and I. I doubt if she ever heard the word sustainability. I mean, and as far as birth control, it didn't happen. Obviously, there was no scientific data for white people that practiced birth control. Maybe in France, they were developing a few things there. The condom, I believe, was in France. And France today still has a sustainable population.
So, as I said, that's Roz's voice. You hear it in the book, and here she is. And we're so, it's a very frank and honest book. And I'm really thankful to you for coming forward and sharing with us your perspective. So, like you do in the book, I just want to dive in and get right down to some brass tacks. So near the beginning of the book, there's this really fun sentence, which is, my parents had 10 kids and I'm not sure why, which I just love. So you were the oldest, and then right after you came a passel of boys, at least one of whom, by the way, is participating in this call. Phil was Phil next to you? Yeah. Or was he was he the next oldest, or?
Oh no, he was the fourth boy down. But after me, there were 5 boys.
So you say in your book that growing up with boys was a good breeding ground for a young feminist, which surprised me.
Yes.
Can you tell us what you mean by that and how that was?
I could prove, I might add, rather easily, that I could do anything they could do. And sometimes I did it better. And as far as the verbal skills, I outshined all my brothers. They just didn't know how to rationalize my verbiage when I came out with statements. But yes, growing up as a feminist, as a young child, was certainly enhanced by having brothers, definitely. And then let's just talk about their role models: Superman, Santa Claus, and Jesus Christ. Those were the white male role models for my brothers. Who did I have? Let's see, Snow White. She had 7 dwarfs. I related to her. Angels, I always pictured them being female, and the Virgin Mary. So those are my lackluster choices for role models.
You must have found some role models. You couldn't
it
have just come
wasn't
out.
until I became a teenager or an adult that they were there. There were so many of them to pick and choose from. But as a young child, Betsy Ross. I mean, she sewed a flag. What kind of role model is that for a young girl? No, she didn't cut it in my book.
So in your book, also pretty early on, actually in the introduction to your book, you talk very frankly about your family's struggles with some mental illness. And it was must have been really, really painful for your family. In 1969, your brother Dan had his first schizophrenic episode. I believe he was a senior in high school.
Yes.
At the time. The next year, another of your brothers joined a cult,
Right.
which is what you call it. In the way you describe it in the book, it certainly sounds like
it's a cult. Yeah.
And that was a different time. I mean, it's even kind of taboo to talk about those things now, but you couldn't avoid talking to them. So how did that impact your family at the time?
It was very hard on these 2 loving parents that gave us everything. The brother that joined a cult was a junior in college. We thought he was all going to graduate with a business degree. He just upped and left. And then my other brother decided to go to Canada to avoid the draft. And I agree with that. I didn't believe in the Vietnam War. I protested against it, but my parents were dealing with a lot of conflict with their kids as young adults. And it weighed heavily on them. And it bothered me. I was the eldest, and I just felt, this is so hard on my parents, so hard. But I have to admit, as the eldest and the in-house babysitter, I just felt an urge to kind of oversee their struggles and take it on. I remember I was the one that got my brother to Ventura County Mental Health. They didn't know how to go about doing it. And he got professional help, but it was a lifelong struggle for him and my parents. Schizophrenia is still around. 10% of the population has mental health issues. They are the homeless people today. And I can honestly say, after Reagan shut down all our mental health institutions, it got worse, because now they were living on the streets, and they still are. So I took the agony and the sorrow of my parents, I took it personally, whereas my brothers seemed to be just doing their own thing.
Well, let's go a little bit into your sort of your biography and your life story. So you were born obviously in Ventura County. You grew up in Oxnard and in Camarillo. When you were growing up in Oxnard, it was the 1950s, and you and I did the math, and we think the population was between 10 and 20,000 there, less than 10% of what it is now. So different,
Yeah.
a different kind of a childhood. You went off to college, and after that, you didn't come home. You ended up at home, right? But you were so clearly trying to differentiate yourself. Oh, the Camarillo Cotter is getting to me. Differentiate yourself from your family. And you came home in 1976, I believe. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And what brought you home again?
I felt that, again, my parents were going through hell. They weren't able to get this issue of Dan resolved. And, you know, I had lived through the 70s and going to school in San Francisco. I was a free woman. I lived with my boyfriend, went to San Francisco State. I had a great life. And I just felt I needed to come home. I just felt an obligation to help them. But I had taught for 4 years at private schools, and that gave me a lot of experience. I was able to finish my credential, get my master's at San Francisco State, and then decided to venture down south to be with my folks and my family. By this time, I had nieces and nephews, these darling children that I cared about, because I knew in my heart I was not going to have kids. That was already defined. I mean, I had changed so many diapers by the age of 10. The last thing I wanted to do was change more. But I also have to say the women's movement, you know, I got struck by it heavily in San Francisco. I don't think that would have happened if I had continued living here. This county is way more conservative than Northern California. And, you know, I heard Jane Fonda talk. I was in demonstrations. I just, you know, embraced feminism because it changed my life. It really did. I knew it was okay not to get married, not to have kids, and live this wonderful life of a woman where all these opportunities were opening up. All the women in my senior class of Dominican, they wanted to get married, and they did. A lot of them did right after graduation. And I just kept shaking my head going, oh, fools, fools. They don't even know about the women's movement.
When did you find out about the women's movement? When did you start to self-identify as a feminist?
When I was going to school at San Francisco State. It wasn't at Dominican, this nice little private Catholic school. No. But once I got out into the real world, I traveled in Europe with my boyfriend. I mean, I just felt like free. I'm free at last. I don't need these obligations.
Was there anybody in your well, no, let me get to that in a little bit. Sorry, let me go back to something else. Okay, so you you were up north, you really got the bug for this activism and feminism. You came back in 1976 and you began to implement your feminism here in Ventura County, I would say. And so you found a way to continue on that path, even in a more conservative environment. So I want to flash forward to 1992, because that was a big year for you in a lot of ways. And the intro to the section on that year reads, see Rozs run, see Rozs run fast, see Rozs fall down, see Rozs get up again. And the term run there, I presume, is a pun because that was actually the first year that you ran for public office.
Right.
And that year was the first time, unfortunately, of a few that you got a cancer diagnosis. And I believe it came to you right before the election. So there's a lot we could ask about that time. But let me just focus first on running as a woman. Tell us what that was like back in 1992. Very different now.
In 1991, if you recall, Anita Hill was facing Congress, including Joe Biden and Ted Kennedy, about these allegations that she was making against Thomas, who eventually did become a Supreme Court judge. But she was making accusations that were totally believable. Any woman who had a brain would know that, yeah, this woman is telling the truth. And what that did was inspire hundreds of women to run for office, and I was included. I thought, I was attending Democratic headquarters, the meetings. I got to know union people. I was involved with the local chapter of NOW. I mean, there was a lot going on that, different connections that I was with. Oh, and here's the other thing. Since I didn't have kids, I had more time, I had more money, and I had more energy to spend on women's issues and politics. And I think that's where women get trapped. They are so fixated on raising kids and making a living. They don't have the luxury of learning about the women's movement. So many people didn't know what I was talking about when I came back here. It was hard. It was a period of adjustment. When I was in San Francisco, everybody was a feminist and they weren't afraid to call themselves that. I know women today that still can't say, I'm a feminist, because they're not. So what's with that?
So when you ran, you got your diagnosis, you were still having to run, and then I presume you went into treatment. When did you go into treatment after that?
As soon as I could after. Yeah, I had a mastectomy from a great local doctor. Yeah.
And that was your first campaign. When did you run again?
In 98 against a Republican. I gotta hold my tongue here, but it was a very close race. It was very disappointing. I cried when I lost because I know I was the better choice. He was not a good choice. He filled out his 6-year term, but I think he tried to run for supervisor and it didn't happen.
What did you learn from those races?
I don't want to get sued.
No, okay. No, I'm not asking any names. I want to talk about you. What did you learn at running?
What did
as
I
a
learn?
woman in the
That
90s?
politics is damn hard. You better have money behind you because it's all about the money. And that means, who do you know? Who do you know in Sacramento? You got to get that all lined up. And I thought I had it pretty well lined up, but again, I'm not going to mention the name of a Democrat in Sacramento that turned me away because he just thought I couldn't pull it off. And I had 43% in 92 and nobody knew me. I said, well, if I can get 43%, what about now, second time around? If you give me the money, I can pull it off. But I think there was a little bit of male chauvinism involved, maybe a lot.
Yeah.
But women have a tougher time. There's no two ways about it.
So, 3 weeks ago, I think I talked to you about this when I met with you last week. The museum had a panel called Changing Face of Ventura County.
Yes.
And it was specifically about female elected officials. And by the way, we have Carmen Ramirez on the session tonight. She asked a question. We'll pose that to you in a little bit. But so thank you, Carmen, for your support and for being here. But our county now has more females in elected positions than ever before in history. We're not alone. You see it across the country. I mean, we have a female vice president. A lot of really great strides. At the same time, there's still a huge number of barricades. So I ask you this from your perspective, because you did live through, women's role in society has changed so drastically, right, since your childhood. So where are you now? Are you hopeful?
Oh,
Are you fearful? Are you both?
I am gleeful, full of hope. I'm so happy for all these young women that are, throwing in their hat and winning. And yes, I am aware that Ventura County has women elected, but I was running 25 years ago. It was a different political world, but I like to think I kind of, helped them along. I helped the next generation of women. And I am thrilled. I'm thrilled with today's verdict. Oh my gosh. Today's verdict is a great stride. Now, I know I'm talking about feminism, but racism is hand in hand with it. I mean, these white males have had it on top since the beginning of the US history, and they need to roll over and either die or say, after you, madam, you go, you take my place.
Okay, wait. I just have to say, there are a lot of really wonderful white males. One of them is with you there.
There's a few, but sadly, there's a lot of them in Congress, in the GOP. I'm sorry, there are. I'm very hopeful.
Good. Speaking of, my 10-year-old white male just got back from baseball practice. So if you hear something in the background, that's what that is. So you have so many achievements. You were on the BCCF board. You started the Coalition Against Domestic Violence back in the 80s. You started a female workforce program at Oxnard College, obviously with a bunch of other people. It's hard to ask you this, but what are you most proud of, do you think?
I think today I would have to say it's the shelter that I lobbied for. I had to lobby with the cities of Oxnard, Ventura, and County of Ventura in the 70s. Nobody knew what the term domestic violence was. Here I am, this young 30-year-old talking about, domestic violence, and they're like, what? But anyway, we got the money. We got $100,000. We purchased a house. It is still existing in Ventura, and it's still being used today. So it used to be called the Coalition Against Family Violence. It's now called the Coalition for Family Harmony. And I'm very proud to have been a pioneer in that effort because, I don't know, I think this is a case where I could use my last name in front of these politicians, and they kind of felt inclined to go up to listen to what I had to say because of my last name being McGrath. I don't think they would have paid attention if my last name had been Smith. Does that sound weird or cocky or arrogant?
I mean, you are a McGrath, but I in reading about that in the book, one of the things that struck me is, and I'd like to ask you about this, you didn't know what you were doing, right?
No, I'd never gotten up in front of a political group and spoke. I mean, this was 1978, it was scary, but I just believed in the cause. I had enough other women around me supporting me. And we all felt, we can get this done. There was Toy White, who was she's retired now, but she was a Supreme Court judge. There were wonderful women around me supporting me on our board, and we made it happen. So I am proud of that effort.
One of the questions I have for many of the families whose names we recognize here in town, because there are so many of them who've been here since, for over 150, almost 200 years. And the McGraths is most definitely one of them. And there are lots and lots and lots of McGraths. And there's just an immediate name recognition. So what is it like to be one of the McGraths?
Well, when you're growing up one of 10, it's not that, it didn't faze me, except now as I'm older and I meet somebody from a board or a nonprofit, and I can see them looking into my eyes and seeing dollar signs. And that's uncomfortable. That bothers me. I give to many causes, but I pick and choose who I give to. And mostly it's to women. I give to domestic violence causes. I give to the Women's Legacy Fund. I just believe, women have been getting the short stick all through history. So it's kind of like making up for lost time.
Okay, women's cause people who are on this call, you heard her say it. That's what she supports.
Oh, are they asking? They're asking who I give to? Oh,
no. That's just me saying that.
Yeah.
So what advice would you have for a young you if you were able to look back, look at your life, look at what you've accomplished? What would you tell yourself like in your 20s as you were growing into a feminist and an activist and somebody who wanted to make a big change in the world?
I would say participate in as many organizations as you can, to the ones that you feel inclined to support. Call yourself a feminist and don't be ashamed not to. I mean, it's ridiculous. I say shame on women who can't identify with the movement at this point in time. You deserve what you get, which is going to be nothing, basically, because the men in your life have all the power. But call yourself a feminist, work for feminist causes, give money to feminist causes, and wake up. Read. And don't listen to the news that your husband necessarily listens to, or don't listen to your husband because he's getting his news from the golf course. And we all know what the golf course is. So I just want to say, take classes that interest you, be a lifelong learner. Don't be afraid to call yourself a feminist lifelong learner.
All right, I have one more question and then I'm going to turn it over and answer some of the questions that are coming out. And this one is not about being a feminist or about being a McGrath. What caused you to write a book at this point in time?
Well, I had bought a place in Oregon, and every summer for 5 years, I was up there taking writing classes. And the writing I did was all about memories. So I had a good half of the book written when COVID hit, which was, last March. And I sat at my computer and went, I think I have enough material here to write my memoir. And then one night in bed, I thought of the title. That just came. And then it took and then I found a wonderful woman in Ojai, Amy Schneider. I hope you're listening. Thank you so much again for all of your help. She was with Ojai Digital and she walked me through the process. I had never written a book. Oh, wait, I had written 2 children's books about my dogs. I had done that. But so I knew I had enough to write about. I mean, my life has been very full, but I needed to piece it all together. And that's what I did in about 3 months' time. And then I got all my 70 photo albums out and was pulling from them the right picture for the right chapter. That took a lot longer than I ever thought it would, but it worked out. It did. And I had all the time in the world. I wasn't going to this luncheon or out with friends or to this meeting. I was at home and it felt good. I have to say, I got my book done. It got published through Amy and I've ordered 50 more copies.
Oh yeah, this is a good time actually, and I'll say this again at the end to talk about where people can get your book. So how can people get Memoir of a Feminist?
Well, I'm going to bring some to the museum. Okay. I really don't want to sell them out of my house because, yeah,
Nobody blames you for that.
I'll bring as many as you want to the museum.
Oh, good. Okay, so we're the only place you can get it. I love that. You can't get it anywhere else, just only at the museum.
There's the bookworm in Camarillo that has a few copies.
Great. Okay, well, we are opening, by the way, June 3rd. We will start being open, just our outside areas and the gardens. We're going to be free to the public. So we will have some books there, and we will be having a book signing event later.
Okay.
But okay, well, I have a couple more closing questions, but right now I hope Denise is there, and it's not just her picture, but Deputy Director Denise Sindelar, I hope will go through the Q&A and pick out some questions for you. There you are.
Hi, Denise. Thank you for the cocktail.
You're very welcome. I'm multi-talented. Elena, did you have a couple closing questions, or would you like me to go through the questions in the Q&A right now? Happy to do it. Okay, great. Hey, so this one's from Betsy, and Betsy, you could pose this yourself, but she wants to know, Roz, if you remember the short-lived Carmen camping trips, and she hadn't realized then that they were part of your feminist ethos. And can you talk a little bit about it?
Oh, that was an answer to the rancheros. I just had the perfect setting. And so we would gather once a year and just get wild and crazy and have a great time. Barbecue, drink, and just party. Yeah. And have good, I might add, really good discussions.
Fantastic. So Carmen Ramirez has a question for you, and she'd like you to remember Alice McGrath, same last name, but very different families.
Yeah.
And today she sees some similarities with both of you, very, very strong women, and she wishes you her very best, but she'd love you to talk about Alice.
I knew Alice not very well. I know she married a McGrath from Montana. But Alice was a strong spirit. Oh my gosh, she taught women self-defense back in the 70s. And I took her class. I have her book. She was and she was up there in age, but she was a unique personality. She really was a woman of conviction and a feminist. I mean, she just, I know, I was thrilled. We had the same last name, but we weren't related.
There are just some really great well-wishers here that I want to share with you, Roz. Rebecca Fox is thanking the museum for hosting these interviews with amazing local heroes. Thank you for kicking off this series. Rochelle Rose says, what a great woman. Happy to hear from you. Diana Martinez is saying, thank you for your service, your trailblazing, and your honesty. She thoroughly enjoyed reading your book, but it's a joy to hear you expand on it today. And she appreciates your humor and hopeful vision for the future. I wanted to ask a quick question, Roz, because you and I met many years ago when I worked at the Ventura bookstore. And since we're talking about your book and those two special guys who own the bookstore and your love of Jack Russell Terriers, I thought maybe you might have a memory of that you could share about Kent and Ed in the bookstore days.
Ed and Kent. Oh, well, I just remember the Great Dane that took up the whole aisle. You had to literally walk around him. But I believe they bought their first Jack Russell in my backyard at a Planned Parenthood fundraiser. We auctioned off this puppy because the puppy was born at my house. And I thought, oh, well, this would be a good donation. And Ed and Kent bought Zelda. And oh, it was those, I had such good memories with those guys. I really did. And yes, I'm a lifelong Jack Russell lover. It goes back to I can't remember, 85, I think. When I moved into my parents' house after they built a house at Faria Beach. So up above the hill was a family that had Jack Russells, and I just fell in love with the breed. And I've always had one, however many years that is. 35 years. They kind of remind me of me. They're peppy, they can be squirrely, but they're high energy.
Very tenacious terriers. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to urge this is your time, people who are on this call, to send your Q&A in. So give us some more questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Elena for a couple of follow-ups, but we'll catch your questions before we close out. Thanks, Roz.
Thank you, Denise. It's been fun knowing you all these years. I'm so glad you're here.
There are actually a couple more questions that have come through, and one of them is from, I have no idea even what the relation is, but it's Marianne. It's like a 14th cousin twice removed or something like that. Hi, Marianne.
Yeah. Marianne McGrath. I know who it is.
A lot of wonderful comments. Her question is, can you talk a bit about what led you to teaching, and Marianne herself is a teacher now, and any takeaways from your years in the classroom?
Teaching for me came very naturally. I was a teacher at my house. Remember, I had all those younger siblings. I would play school with them. I mean, I was like the boss lady, and they just kind of respected me as a teacher. So falling into that was very natural. I can't imagine having done anything else. But I taught at the junior college level, and I've taught at Ole through the university at Channel Islands. I taught women's history. I put together a crash course and on women's history, and I really enjoyed teaching that. But I never taught high school, but I enjoyed my 8 years teaching kindergarten at Mesa Union in Somas. Those were the wonderful years that I had. And every Friday I would bring Dinky, my Jack Russell Terrier. And I know Mary Ann must remember that, because I think she was still attending Rio Mesa at the time.
We have another.
What? Go ahead.
Oh, we have another question from Ana Valevilla. And she would like you to elaborate on your interaction with feminists of color. By the way, she's very proud to know you.
I have this wonderful Latina group of women that I get together with. I haven't seen them lately, but we get together, we do birthdays, we do Christmas. I crave women of color. The one group I don't have in my life are Afro-American women. I don't know where to find them. I don't know where they are. I knew a few when I was running for office, but they have a different perspective. It's healthy, it's good. And then a lot of the time we're on the same page. I mean, yeah. Anna, thank you for asking that. And I will see you on the 29th.
Okay, I have to say, my mother, who is here, hi Mom, has a question, and she would like for you to tell us a little bit more about your mother, Eve.
Oh, my mother was so precious. She and my dad met during World War II in Wales, in the UK. She was a RAF secretary. My dad was a supply sergeant for the US Army. We know very little. They told very little. We didn't ask enough questions, but they had 10 kids. I don't know what made that happen, except Dad was very Catholic and my mom was a convert. She was raised Episcopalian, but they were both very loving. And then as time wore on and more babies came, it got hard. really, really overwhelmingly hard to do what they did day in and day out. My mom did have outside help, live-in help for part of the time, but I just remember her getting up at the crack of dawn and making 7 lunches before we went to school. I mean, she was dedicated. She really was.
When did she die? How old was she when she died?
She was 87, so she died in 2007.
Before your father, I think. Isn't
No,
that right?
after.
Oh, no,
he died in 95
Oh, okay.
Of cancer. Cancer is throughout our family.
Yeah.
But mom's dad, our grandfather, came out here when I was in 8th grade, and then he died the next year. So it was a big treat to meet him. But she took me to England on her own when I was 7 years old. And there were no brothers around, no dad, just mom and I in England for about 3 weeks. And it was, I'll never forget it. It's the only time I had with her by myself.
I have to say, you know, because I have read the book, that the descriptions that you give of your mostly female relatives, but also really your father, are just so loving and really draw a really beautiful picture of them. One of the things that is in the book is what your father said about why he was attracted to your mother when he saw her at the RAF dance in Wales, I think. And you expected him to be like, well, she looks so cute in her uniform. And he just said her kindness. And it's just, that says volumes about your family.
My dad was that kind of guy, you know, he was just, and I often think about, oh, I wish I'd asked them more. They got married in Connecticut. She flew in from England. Flew in with his family, and they got married in Connecticut and took a train across the US for their honeymoon. And why didn't I ask more about it? But they weren't going to tell us anyway, so maybe there was no point. But it just sounded like the most romantic thing to me ever. And here's the other thing. I think they liked babies. I just have a feeling they liked babies because they made 10 of them. And I think they had survived the war. And that had to be brutal on both of them. And I think they just, had this overpouring of love. So that's my rationale, why they had 10 kids.
I was going to let Denise go in here, but I'm going to keep on going because there's a follow-up question here. And we have time, I think, for like 2 more questions. So Stephanie Correa wants to know if you can elaborate on your relationship with your mom during your formation as a feminist.
She wasn't always on board with me. She knew that I was an independent female, especially during my teen years. But guess what? She had 9 other kids to take care of. So that kind of let me off the hook. I mean, I was busy doing stuff behind her back that she never knew about. But eventually, she became pro-choice. She supported Planned Parenthood. She embraced feminism. And she wanted me to win these races that I was, running for. And she thought women needed to move on and advance. So she was very much a support base for me.
So there's one more. There's a question here for you, Roz, because you're so inspiring to young women in Ventura County. Who is your inspiration today? You said many, but could you narrow it down?
Wow. Oh, Greta. Greta's my inspiration. She's the youngest one talking about climate change. Thank God she's around with her voice. I believe she's got a documentary coming up this week. I think it's going to be shown, but I think Greta, she makes me cry. She's so amazing. But Ventura County has some prize women too. I mean, I'm thrilled with Julia Brownlee, what she's done. I mean, she's hung in there. The women supervisors, I think we need term limits on supervisors. I know you're listening, Carmen. And Carmen's an inspiration to me because she has not had an easy time of getting there, but she got there, by God, and she's going to show them. I know she is. Carmen Ramirez.
Wonderful. She is an inspiration. Judybbins wants to share with you that you had her son in your class and he had ADHD. You made a difference in his life. He loved you. He now has his own business, passion, working with young adults with disabilities, and she will be forever grateful to you.
This makes my day. Oh my gosh. I remember the family very well. Oh gosh, please remember him to me, okay? I think, I get so excited when I run into a student I had. I'm going to see one in a couple of weeks that has a new baby girl. I mean, being a teacher and forming those relationships with the families it's so important.
Oh, she froze.
Okay, we're going to do a little technical assist. That's why we're all here at the museum. So you're going to talk a little bit, Elena, while we go check on Rozs.
All right, we're going to have, just so you know, if she is able to come back, we're going to have one more question, and that is going to be Margaret Matson's question. And Margaret, I'm curious how you know she was treasurer of her senior class in high school. You must have gone there with her. Did you get her, Denise, or is she still...
Jonathan is working on unfreezing Rozs. It might have been that Camarillo cod. Might have been. I don't know.
Yeah, no, she's okay, everybody. She's okay. I will just say one last time. We may have seen the last of Rozs this evening. I think that might have happened. I'm going to say one last time that the books will be available at the museum. You actually can get them on Amazon. She would prefer, though, for you to get them from us, which I love. And also they will be signed if you get them from us, and she can personally sign them for you. If you would like. Oh, and here she is.
We're back.
Oh, good.
A little glitch. Yeah.
All right. Well, we have one last question for
Okay.
you. And this is from Margaret Matson, who says,
I went to high school with her.
I thought so. Okay, so Peggy says you were treasurer of your senior class in high school. Did that have any bearing on your later path?
Oh, Peggy, I'm good with money. I know how to budget. I know how to, work the, what can I say? I know how to work it. Yeah, I guess it did have a bearing because I still have the books. That's so funny you asked about that. But no, I'm not one to spend money, but I do spend it when I feel inclined. Again, I say this, I didn't have kids. I have art. I collected art instead of kids. So what can I say?
And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that Supervisor Ramirez did chime in and say that they do have term limits. So that was good.
Oh, good. Good. Thank you.
Denise, any more questions? Or
let's see. No, May Toft Sharp says she does believe she remembers Dinky, who was their role model when he was very elderly and still to draw. So thanks for that memory of Dinky.
Yeah. I might add, I was an art major in college.
Oh.
I don't think, did I say that in the book? I think I did. So
yeah, you did. Yes, you do.
Yeah, I've always had an appreciation of art, and it's stayed with me throughout my life. And it's the one thing that gives me joy. I mean, well, a lot of things give me joy, but I love good art, and I like collecting local artists. And I have a painting by my art instructor who became quite well known, Russell Chatham. You can Google him up. He just passed away a year ago, but he was a big influence on me as far as my own art goes.
Well, we're going to get you off in time. Happy hour is about to end. I mean, it can continue as long as you want. I just want to say, Roz, the book really is inspiring and it's a fun read. It's not like a slog, by any stretch of the imagination. It's a really fun read. And it really spoke to me, as I said in the beginning, about family, about mothers and daughters, and also about the importance of finding your tribe, finding a group of like-minded, in your case, definitely like-minded women with whom you can do anything. And I think you have the Margaret Mead quote in the book, don't you?
I do.
Which is, do you remember what it is? I could find it.
I can't remember.
I believe it is, doubt not that a small group of committed people can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that has. It's something I'm paraphrasing. Not as good as Margaret Mead, but there you go. So I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being our first on the Local History Happy Hour. All the rest of you, we have another session coming up in 2 weeks, same time, same place. That will be with Jose Alamillo, professor at Cal State University Channel Islands, who has written a few books. His most recent is about Mexican sporting in the United States. So I think that'll be really fantastic and really enlightening. And Roz, any final statement you want to make as we sign off?
Oh, Elena, thank you for this opportunity to talk about the book. With COVID, I haven't had a chance to promote it accurately, and I feel like this is like my first book review, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'll be happy to do book signings wherever, whenever. Just tell me. Thank you.
Thank you, Roz. Without you, we wouldn't be here. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you for being here.